Welcome to the 7th chapter of the Book of Esther. The last chapter we saw where Haman had planned to have the Mordecai hung upon the xilu in his house, 75 foot tall, and the plans were changed as he went in the morning to talk to the king and tell him his plan on hanging Mordecai. And before he came in, the king had summoned someone to read the good works of different people, and he found out about Mordecai's stopping the two eunuchs from killing him, and so he asked if that Mordecai had been rewarded in any way, and they said no. And so when Haman came in, basically, the king had Haman put him on a horse, put the king's robe on Mordecai, and for Haman to walk him around the city, saying this is the man who the king admires or is friend of or something like that. So Haman went back to his house, and his wife and friends told him that it was all over. Everything he had planned against the Jews is backfiring. So now, the next morning, the eunuchs come and they get him, take him to the banquet that Esther had planned for the king and Aman. And it says, and the king and Aman entered to drink with the Vasilisi, queen. And the Vasilevs said to Esther on the second day at the poto, the banquet, Devtera, we had Deuteronomy, the second law. And a poto generally is something to do with, is more of a drinking banquet. What is it, Queen Esther? What? And what is your request? And what is your petition? And it will be to you and to half of my kingdom. In the imperative, you can have it. Anything that you want. What is your request? In answering, she said, if I found favor before the Vasilevs, let him give Psyche to my request. Let him give life to my request, and my people to my petition. So by saying this Psyche, the life, generally it would mean that they were to be killed, to be ended. And so give life to her request and give life to the people. Don't let them be killed. And she will bring this out, what's happening. For both I and my people were sold into destruction and ravaging and slavery. So I believe she's recounting how these people were taken from Jerusalem or Israel into Babylon, and they became there for ravaging and for slavery. Many of the Jews have experienced this over the thousands of years since the Romans overcame Israel and sent all the Jews into the diaspora throughout the world. Sometimes the Jews found things very, very bad. For instance, with the Spanish, I think they're called the Moros, they were cast out of Spain, and then they were savagely killed and so forth in Nazi Germany in the 30s, and at the same time in the Soviet Union we had actually it was before, before the revolution, we had the Tsars who mistreated a lot of the Jews and kept moving them around, and they made a play, Fiddler on the Roof, about that, how these Jews were constantly being harassed. And so these are the bad things that these people have went through, some of them, but other places they have done well. I believe in Austria before the First World War and during the First World War, there a lot of Jews were high up in the government. And also in England, we had Disraeli. He was a Jewish prime minister. I believe it was during Queen Victoria, if I'm not mistaken. In the United States today, the Jews pretty much control the media in the United States. A lot of the money and there are quite a few are at higher levels of government. So they can have both good or bad, and here it was bad. And she continues, we and both our children for manservants and maidservants. That's what they became, servants. And I neglected to speak, to say anything, for the slanderer is not worthy of the courtyard of the king. The diavolos, the devil. Diavolos would be Spanish for the devil. The slanderer is not worthy of the courtyard. And the king said, well, who is this who dared to do this thing? He didn't know who she's talking about. And Esther said, Anthropos, a man, an enemy, Haman, this wicked man. And Haman was disturbed before. Wow, I'm supposed to jump. There it goes. The Vasileos and the Vasilisi. He was disturbed before them because he's now everything is backfiring. Everything that he had planned is collapsing, and now he's in danger of his life. And so he sees that, and so he starts to, it says, well, we'll get to that here in another verse, but the queen hearing that, the king hearing that, is probably upset because Haman was somebody that he knew and trusted, and Esther was somebody that he loved. Apparently, wouldn't be going through all this if he didn't, and so he had to go out and try to think this all over. And he rose up from out of the symposium. We have a symposium, comes from that word, to go into the garden, the gathering of these people. And Aman appealed to the Vasili's son, the queen, for he saw himself being in kakis, evils, and kaka is bad things in a lot of languages. And the Vasilevs returned from out of the kipu, the garden, and Aman had fallen upon the cleaning, petitioning the Vasili's son. Haman was on the place that the queen was lying and eating, probably some type of, it wasn't like a flat bed, it was a cleaning. We have the word recline. It reclines. You lay on it, but you're on a slant, and you're like this, and you can reach over and grab things off of the table, foods that are prepared at the banquet. And the king said, so as even with my wife, you use force in my house? So he saw the things that were going on with that Haman was doing. Haman's making it worse for himself. And Haman, or Aman, acoustics comes from that word, hearing, was overawed in front of him, in front of the king. And to make it worse, Harbona, one of the eunuchon, the eunuchs, said to the Vasilea, the king, behold, well, Haman prepared a tree, a xylon, a timber, basically now. It wasn't a tree, but he prepared a timber for Mordecai, the man speaking for the king. And it was set up straight in the places of Haman, 50 cubits high, that says it's 75 feet. And the king said, well, let him be crucified upon it. Now, here we have the stavrothito, is to crucify. It's the only place that this word appears, and it's in the verbal form in the Old Testament. Be put on it for death, basically. Now, how exactly he was put on it, you have different opinions. Some people think his hands were straight up, others outside as a cross. And I'm not going to get into a big study on what the crucifixion was, but it was basically a timber, xilu, that was made to put a person on it, either to hang him. Generally, to hang somebody means to hang them with a noose around their neck, and they strangle, but not necessarily. Could be nailed on, as Jesus was, and he was nailed on the stavro. And so that's the now nominal form, Stavro. And Haman was hung, there ekramasti, upon the xilu, the timber which he prepared for Mordecai, and then the king slackened from the rage. So a Haman was a man who wanted to do in the Jews. He didn't like being disrespected, and for some reason he decided he's going to get rid of all the Jews. Now, if it was disrespected just by a certain person, probably any other race of humans, he probably would have just made it personal with that person. But here he goes to the Jews and destroy all the Jews from Ethiopia to India. And what it reminds me, or I thought thinking about it, today Haman is doing the work of wanting to get rid of Christians, the same as Haman in the Old Testament wanted to get rid of the Jews. There are many Hamans who hate Christians and want to get rid of them. They don't like to hear the things that Christians tell them. I had that problem this morning with a man that I had met a couple of times before, and I prayed and talked to him about the Lord and certain things, and he got offended, mad, and before he was all talking about how we have a free, we have free speech, we can say anything we want, but afterwards, when he was leaving, he's complaining about what my speech was, that it should be stopped, and they shouldn't allow somebody to come in a coffee shop and speak like that and say things like that. So the free speech stopped at Christ. And so, but this is what we are to expect. Jesus has warned us. So there are a lot of Hamans that are still around. It's not only the Haman with the Jew, but the Hamans that we face every day. Chapter 8 now, Haman's dead, and Esther now is going to petition the king for the people, the Jews, her race. And we'll find out more about that in chapter 8, and I hope you'll join us next video seminar. God bless.